Modern Eater Network production. Hell yeah. Let's get this party hopping. No more milling around. Get ready to have a mash ton of fun. Here are your hosts, Andrew Moore and Jeff Tyler.
Hey everybody, it's 4 o'clock on Monday, and that means that you are probably not doing work. You are sitting on your computer watching Facebook because it's time for Beer Craft. And we are here in the studio kitchen, Colorado, home of the Modern Eater Network. I'm Andrew Moore, Intrepid Sojourner Beer Project, here with Jeff Tyler, Spice Trade Brewing. And we are continuing our summer of travel sort of indirectly this week, and we're looking at beer journalism. Yeah. And we have two widely traveled, well-traveled beer journalists with us today, Ken and April Pishna from Living a Stout Life. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having us on, guys.
Definitely, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, for sure. When we can't travel ourselves, we always like to chat with some other people who have had some time to, venture out and get some intel and bring it back. And you guys have spent over a year traveling. You quit your jobs, you got an RV or a van, and you have been traveling around the country, visiting breweries and telling the stories of the brewers and the people that you've met along the way. It's kind of crazy to just quit your job and go do that. What inspired you guys just to kind of to jump right into it? What inspired you guys to make that jump?
Wow. So that journey kind of started with we have two sons, and both are adult age now, and our younger one is now a junior at Metro State College here in Denver. But as he was growing up, we always knew we were going to move out pretty quickly once he kind of took off and started doing his own thing. But we had always thought we were going to move up to the Colorado mountains. Found out how expensive that was, and so we started reassessing. But we realized that we always like to travel a lot, and we kind of got to thinking, why do we want to lock ourselves down in another physical spot again, up in the mountains? Even though we love the mountains, why do we want to just be there? Why can't we, do our travels?
Kind of irked me that I couldn't find a position that I wanted up there, and then I was like letting somebody else dictate where we should live because I couldn't find a job somewhere we wanted to live. Yeah. So it's like, well, why not create our own path? And that's when we kind of started thinking about the traveling piece. And all right, well, why not an RV?
Yeah. Nice. So what's your background in before you decided to make this jump, just for our listeners who might not be familiar with your show?
So my original background was I was for several years in printing and graphic design, and then I got into sports journalism, and I've been doing that for about 15, 16 years, and I actually still do that part-time right now. So that's still, I hadn't fully quit my job. My job is just able to go mobile with me. So I also do that as well as do the travel and beer journalism side that we're building.
Yeah. Great.
And mine, I've had a jack of all trades. The world is way too big to become an expert at much of anything, so I've tried a variety of different things. I've done media photography for a little while with the sports journalism with him. Also done like sports photography with the X Games. So that was a lot of fun too.
Nice.
But then most recently I was a teacher, so I was 5th grade and middle school teacher, which I loved that job, but hard work.
Yeah. It's hard to travel too. That's not quite a mobile job. You can't do that with just Wi-Fi.
Kind of turning the education piece maybe more towards the beer now.
Yeah, I was teaching for a while, and I was like, but I have to teach college students because their parents are somewhere else, right? And they ostensibly want to be treated like adults, right? So you can treat them like adults, and I don't have to do this helicopter thing with their parents. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for people who can hang in there and do elementary school, middle school. Oh yeah. I feel like the world's worst kids are in 7th and 8th grade, and then high school going on. So
that's why you got into beer. I'm assuming.
Yeah, you're like, I need a drink after this.
She's recovering from teaching.
Yeah.
So, but how did you get why beer? Has craft beer always been something that you guys gravitated towards, or?
Yeah, we kind of grew up on beer in the 90s kind of phase of craft beer with New Belgium and Oscar Blues taking off back then. Yeah. And those were the kind of beers, those and Deschutes, and those were the types of companies that got us into some good beer, because neither one of us really drank a lot of beer before that. We weren't the big beer brand drinkers.
No, I think it kind of paired with when we started snowboarding as well. So let's
Yeah,
started in the mountains and snowboarding like 20 some years ago, and like, oh, what do we want to drink after this? And it started becoming this really great big beer tastes, and kind of paired off from there.
Yeah, and then as it blew up, it just became a lot of fun, and not just because of the beer. The beer is great. There's so much great beer out there now, though. It's we've just find like a sense of community around good craft beer. It's like anywhere you go, like. We don't find ourselves going to the liquor store all the time and going home and just sitting down and drinking. It's like we're usually, if we're going to the liquor store, we're taking that with us somewhere to hang out with somebody, or we're going down to a couple different craft breweries to hang out and meet new people and things like that.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, we were brainstorming, like, what kind of company can we do to make money on the road if I'm going to quit my job and he's not going to work as much? Like, we've got to figure out something. And so that community around beer kind of got us thinking more. And I came home from one of my last days of work, and he's like, well, how about living a stout life? And I was like, well, I don't want it to be all around beer, like everything around beer. But then stout has that double-edged kind of meaning, like that full life.
Right.
Yeah.
Living your fullest life through beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it.
Very much.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think we've talked about it a lot on the show before. Sort of the sense of community that I think draws a lot of people into the beer culture. Right? It's very communal. It can be very friendly. It can be really supportive, and it's almost like anywhere. The thing that I love about the beer world is I can go somewhere. Let's say I go to Chicago and I go to a random brewery and I sit down at the bar. You know, you can start talking to the bartender there, and almost instantly you kind of get like pulled into this like family of the beer world in that region. And it makes it a really, I've got some of the best recommendations that I've ever had before as far as other places to go based on those conversations with those people. They're super open to be like, oh, like they'll lead you. If you show up to a city, you don't know where to go, find a brewery, talk to like the bartender, and they'll like kind of lead you towards what to explore in that city. So I think it's a great way to travel with that in mind, because you sort of get Sherpa'd around to different places naturally.
Right. Yeah, we've come across that quite a bit as well. You know, with different people we've met in different cities that, you know, they either at least steer you in the right direction or even walk you that way. You know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think community is one of the things that like pulls people to the beer industry too. They like they it looks like it's a good time, right?
Well, and here in Colorado, it really is. I mean, you guys being inside, you know, the behind the scenes on the brewing side, it's, you know, it's a pretty friendly industry overall. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of exceptions, but, you know, overall it's a pretty friendly industry, and it's getting more and more competitive every day. So that's probably going to change a little bit, but I don't know. I still feel like there's a kind of a kinship between brewers from all across helping each other. We hear stories all the time of brewers helping each other out.
Yeah, if you run out of ingredients, you can text a couple people, say, hey, I ran out of this hop. Do you have any? They'll help you out. Like, it is a very, I mean, you think about other industries, that would not be helping your competition is like not something that people do.
Right.
So it definitely makes it unique.
Yeah, I think about when we were getting started, you know, my business partner, Ben, was sort of handling a lot of the financial side, and we would go into breweries, we'd have meetings in breweries, and inevitably we'd end up like talking to the bartender, oftentimes the brewery owner, and he'd be like, oh yeah, let me just, I'll go get my books and you can look at them. And he was like, what? Like, no one does that.
Yeah.
Like, no one just shows you their books and is like, here, hope this helps.
Yeah, it's not like the old days where Sam Walton's taking a little notebook and walking into Kmart and writing down all the prices, going, okay, where can I undercut them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those days are gone.
No.
But yeah, so you guys have seen a lot of the beer world too outside of Colorado. We always try to kind of say like, what's going on outside of Colorado, what's happening out there. You guys have driven to over 20 different states. How many different states have you driven through in the last year and a half?
We're pushing up on 40 now.
40.
Yeah, over the
Just
last
over
year
a
and a
year.
half.
Yeah.
So what's your, you know, this what's any memories pop out as far as places you've been to? You know, I feel like when you do a trip like that, there's always the places that you expect to be good, and they probably are pretty good. But I always find the more interesting stories are where maybe you didn't even plan anything, and you just happened to stumble across something, and you're like, this is awesome. Did that happen to you guys at all along your journey?
Oh, yeah. Omaha, Georgia.
Omaha, Georgia?
And I was thinking Bryan, Ohio.
Oh, okay. That's another good one, too. That one
tiny
we did
towns.
more stumble across.
Yeah.
So what happened there? Was it just a small brewery you weren't expecting to be good, or something else that happened that wasn't expected?
So we went to a small brew fest in Savannah, and we met a guy there from Omaha Brewing. So we happened to be traveling from Savannah to my brother's place in Foley, Alabama. So, and Omaha, Georgia, 150 people in this town
If
is
that.
directly in line.
All right.
And he's like, you know, we started chatting with him, and he's like, where are you headed? And we told him, and he's like, well, you got to come by the brewery. And we're like, where? And he's like, Omaha. And we're like, what?
That is not on the way.
Yeah.
And so we get out to this brewery, and I mean, just the most friendly people ever in the world, you know. I mean, they started their brewery. Basically, the guy who grew up in that area, became a dentist, went off to Atlanta, made a lot of money. His town's faltering, like a lot of small towns across the country, and he wanted to save it. So he was going to open a winery, realized how long it was going to take to get that off the ground. You got to let those grapes mature. But so he's like, hey, we can make beer in like 2 weeks. So he opened a brewery, and now they just put in their first 120 barrel fermenter.
Wow.
And they already had 3 60-barrel fermenters.
So
and
clearly
so
they're
a
selling
production.
outside of Omaha, Georgia.
Yeah. They have a very nice tap room there, and they're not too far from, is it Fort Benning, I think?
Yeah, I think it's
I think it's Fort Benning. And so they do have a decent amount of foot traffic, but mostly on the weekends. And so you can imagine a town of 150 people doesn't really support a brewery all that well on their own.
Right.
And they're, 30 to 45 minutes away from anywhere else. So.
But again, it was the community and the family that they made. Like, they made their employees part of their family. And then anybody who comes in is like automatically a part of their family.
Yeah.
So we've been back there afterwards that too. So we've come back to Denver and then back again to the East Coast and to see them. And it's like coming home to family.
Yeah. They're like, remember, you're like, oh, you're coming back.
Yeah.
And you tell people about their story outside of their town, which is a great way to sort of spread that word.
Yeah. So, if Omaha Brewing is listening, we need some of their beer now in Colorado.
Yeah.
We got to try this.
Yeah, bring it out here. We'll give it a try. We'll drink it right on Beercraft.
There you go. I think we can transport it back, right? I mean, we're okay as long as we don't.
As long as you don't, put it in the U.S. Postal Service.
As long as we
box,
don't sell it.
Yeah. For tasting purposes only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So was that it? I mean, you talk a lot about the community. Like, none of it, the stories that you immediately came to your mind were like, this is what the tap room where we had a really great experience. Not like, this is the place where we went and had this incredible Russian Imperial Stout kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's definitely not the first thing that ever pops in my head is
And it's the same
the beer
thing.
I had here.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the one I mentioned in Bryan, Ohio. Like, we were just staying in another place and happened to catch that there was a brewery there in an old church. Like, okay, we'll check it out. And we met this couple that had nothing really to do with the brewery. They just were longtime fans of the brewery who lived in Bryan, Ohio for like years and years and years and have grown up there. And we immediately connected with them. So then from there, we connected with the people who play music at the brewery, talked to the owners a little bit, and then just made this connection there. And now they're lifelong friends.
Yeah.
So it's not actually the beer that you're always drinking. It's just the people that you meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to dig into that a little bit because you guys are beer journalists. We sort of the topic of the show, which we're going to start getting into, is like, what is beer journalism compared to a beer influencer? And the things you guys are talking about now are very much things that they're non-tangible. They're real things that you can't just like see online or really read about. Like, you need to go there and experience it. Like, how do you feel like the sort of the digital journalism or digital influencer landscape in the beer world is like at odds with that real world experience you guys are talking about? You can't like rank a like family embracing level of a brewery on a beer app, but that's a huge part of what makes beer so special, is that real in-person experience.
Yeah, but the thing is you can tell those stories though.
Yeah.
Because like just telling the story of Omaha Brewing here, it's not going to resonate as deeply as it did with us because we were there. We went through it, and other people have been there and went through it. They'll get it that deep. But that kind of connects with a lot of people is the story.
Right.
That crazy story behind the brewery. Why did you start this brewery, or what inspired you to do this? And I think that now when not to put down what you guys do, but there's a lot of great beer out there now. So it's really hard for a beer, especially just one beer, one brand of beer, one specific beer, to stand out from all the rest. Because it's like, how many Russian Imperial Stouts are there out there that are just fantastic?
Right.
You're building more of an experience now, I think, when you're building a brewery. And then we've heard about that too, just talking to different journalists around the country too, is like how are you pairing your beer? What are you pairing it with? It's not just pairing it with food anymore. It's pairing it with like a bicycling event, or pairing it with a movie, or pairing it with something else that has this connection to you.
Yeah, there's a brewery in Missoula, Montana called Imagination that they actually sectioned off a very specific area of their brewery as a sort of meeting room, classroom for like different people in the community to come and hold gatherings there just to talk about, social topics and not to lean, they probably lean one way themselves, but they let anybody come in and use that space to talk about issues that affect the town or the world at large, and that's kind of those are kind of unique things that I think set a brewery apart and make people kind of gravitate there.
Yeah, and that's kind of what like the pub was originally designed for, as like a community meeting place. People can talk about, you think about the American Revolution, like in Boston, and all like Paul Revere hanging out in the Black Rose or whatever that bar was. But it's kind of lost that to a degree. I really like that idea. And, we at Spice Trade have a very similar, concept of what beer should be, kind of experiential. We do beer and food pairings, which a lot of places do, but we have a mix pack, and on the bottom of the mix pack it has like activity pairing suggestions, like, oh, you should bring this little umbrella with you to the pool, or you should bring, this chai milk stout with you to a campfire because it pairs super well with s'mores, or just hanging out and it's a little chilly at night. So I think that's really important, and I'm interested to see how it evolves, right? I'm interested to see like what happens in 5 to 10 years when sort of like the guys that are like only making good beer or not making good beer are kind of like maybe whittled away, and all of a sudden you have this, it seems like we're going to have this whole new level of like experience with beer that's going to sort of get shaken out over the next like 5 years. So I'm like super interested to see what other stories that we find, that you guys find of similar sort of experiential breweries like that.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, funny side note while we're telling stories about beer, like thinking about pubs, like, so if you go all the way back, you're talking about like the American Revolution, if you go all the way back to 4,000 years ago and 1770 BC, we have Hammurabi's Code. And on Hammurabi's Code, there is a law that says, if conspirators meet in your tavern and talk about the government and they're caught, right, the conspirators are put to death because it's Hammurabi's Code and everyone's put to death. And the tavern owner is put to death.
Oh, man.
Right? Man. So, like, even 4,000 years ago, right, like the Assyrians were worried about people meeting in the tavern and, like, talking about political change.
Now they're being welcomed into a special room, and they can uprise as much as they want to uprise.
It's much safer now, much less lethal.
I mean, that we're actually making progress with political movements. Is that what you're trying to say?
It seems like it. I mean, at least, we're at least
in the brewery.
In
your world. That's
in the tap room we are, but
it's no longer
the rest
my
of the
fault
world
if
at
your
large
political movement gets violent. Just because you had beers in my tap room.
Yeah, and no one's allowed to put you to death either.
That's true.
I don't think that's fair.
Thanks.
Hammurabi guy, I don't like him. I don't know what his deal is.
Yeah.
Eye for an eye, man.
Yeah. So let's get into kind of the meat of it. We talked about it a little bit before we went on. Let's talk about journalism, because there's a lot of people out there talking about beer. We live in a great digital age where everybody has access to cell phones and computers. Anybody can have their own Instagram page. Anybody can make a podcast. What separates journalism from that? Kind of, as a journalist, what is journalism? Are there codes that need to be followed, or principles? What makes that different than sort of somebody who wants to influence other people's decisions without that journalistic background?
I mean, honestly, to me, it boils down to a sense of ethics on what you're talking about. I mean, you have to take the time to learn what you're talking about and know what you're talking about, make sure it's factual, at least to the best of your knowledge, and that you're covering all your bases on that, and you're not misrepresenting anything there. You can't take, like, if you tell me something and I chop out a few words to make it sound how I want it to sound.
Right.
That's not journalism.
Or the title you want.
Right. You even have to be careful with titles, because, when you try to come up with a title for an article or for a video or whatever, you want it to sound good so people will click on it and read it or watch it. But you got to keep in mind that's the end goal, is for them to read it or watch it, not get misled into something that isn't there. And that's a hot debate now in journalism, is, clickbait. Everybody knows clickbait titles and stuff. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to being honest and checking your facts and making sure you're doing things on an up and up basis. And when you are giving an opinion, in my opinion, it should be backed up by fact. It shouldn't just be spouting off and saying, oh, this is this way because I said so.
And
it's like, and we get too much of that nowadays, I think.
being okay, it's like I used to tell my students all the time too, and my kids, like, you don't know everything, so it's okay if you make a mistake, but just own up to that mistake. And say, like, oh, I cannot believe I didn't check this the correct way, or thank you for making me aware of that. But just knowing that you don't know everything, and it's okay that you're a learner alongside everybody else who's learning too.
Yeah, I think it's hard, and I feel like we sometimes forget that in the beer community, or it becomes harder to admit your mistakes. So, we were talking earlier about how the tap room is becoming more about the experience now, and now we're out there, competing with guys like Blue Moon and 10 Barrel, who come out and they're opening $3, $4, $5 million tap rooms, right? And we're saying earlier, they're not offended at all, but there's a lot of people out there in addition to us that make great beer. Like in Colorado, world award-winning beer just sort of gets you a seat at the table, right? And then it's what do you do above and beyond that to get people into the tap room? And I think that's it's just becoming more and more important.
Yeah, and the other part, the tough part with that too is the money part of things, right? Breweries like Blue Moon and 10 Barrel and I'm trying to think of some other big ones, Epic and Odell, right? These guys have money. They have enough money to create the optimal experience for anybody. So it makes it tough to stand out when most people don't know the difference between a brewery that can make it. If John Smith walks into a brewery and they're like, oh man, this is beautiful, this is what all breweries should look like. And then they go to another one that's not as well funded, and they look around, they're like, well, this isn't what I expected. It's not as polished or whatever. So I feel like we're always trying to kind of explain to people the sort of the range, right, of what breweries are, what their ownership levels are. We're always fighting the fight of sort of explaining to people the craft breweries that have been purchased by big beer and why that's a problem. But that's a whole separate topic.
But to your point, I think one of the challenges of being in the beer industry right now is the bar is so high and the knowledge expectation is so high. It's hard to mess up, right? Every time, we release a beer, that beer is compared to the best example of that style in the country, right? And it's hard to be well, we're experimenting with New England IPAs and we tried this and it didn't really work out, but it's good and we didn't really want to dump it. And it becomes, that's where I think telling the story becomes so important, right? If there's some kind of story to the beer, that helps with that learning process, I think.
Well, journalism is supposed to be about the facts and the figures and the statistics and trying to stay kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just even and not picking one side over another side. But at the same but at the same time, it's the story. That's what you do in journalism. That's why a lot of people go into the field, is they want to tell the stories behind it.
Right.
And in a sea of breweries out there all over the world, which one are you going to choose, and why are you going to choose it? So you can choose it based off of the statistics and the small business if you want to support small businesses, but people still need a connection from when they were in 2 years old to trying to connect with their parents to 99 years old, trying to find that connection with people. And that's kind of what we hope to do, is through those statistics and facts, is to bring out those stories even more too.
Yeah.
Well, for us, the breweries that we've always connected to or been drawn to more than others have some sort of story behind them. It's I can go to one of the big breweries that spent millions of dollars in their tap room, and I feel okay, I could have went down to Black Eyed Pea or something. I mean, it's it feels okay, cool. It's a nice touristy kind of experience, but that's not what I want out of my tap room, when I go usually. So,
and I suppose in that way,
there's probably other people that differ with me on that too.
Yeah, but I suppose in that way we're a journalist, but at the same time, I suppose we're an influencer because we want to influence people to go to the ones that have the stories.
Right.
and the smaller breweries and the small businesses. So I suppose in that way they kind of intertwine. It's
Yeah.
hard to separate them.
Yes,
Right.
is there a difference? I mean, we've sort of posed this, I guess, potential juxtaposition, right? Do journalists make that connection in a different way? That connection between sort of the story and the product in a different way than influencers make the connection?
That's a good question. I think, I don't know. I think the difference is more what you're doing with that connection. Because like as a journalist, if you're going to take that connection and write about it for craftbeer.com or Porch Drinking or somebody like that, you know, you got to have your stuff together, and you need to be presenting things in a good factual manner. Whereas as an influencer, you might be like, this is my favorite place, and they give me a lot of free beers here, and like I'm gonna really push them because they're really nice to me. And you can be an influencer without having to have journalistic ethics.
Yeah.
I think I had it in my head. As a journalist, like you're writing the story and creating that story, but you're giving your readers, your consumers, the space and the path to make their own choice to
Right.
make the connection.
Here is the information.
Yeah, so
Take
now-
it in and do what you will with it.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And the influencers are more basically saying, like, here's what maybe this is an oversimplification, but is it more like an influencer saying, here's what I think or here's what I like, and I'm just going to post about this stuff, and because of maybe that network of people that they know, that's sort of how the influence travels? Do you think it's that separated, or it sounds like there's definitely a bit of overlap between the two, or there can be?
Yeah, there's definitely overlap. I mean, we write articles and when we create videos, and we write for other people at times, but we promote all that stuff on Instagram and Facebook and everything like everybody else. And you know, sometimes you have opinion in there, and you say this is a great little place, and you should check it out when you're in that area. You know, things like that.
I wonder for the consumer, and like, so recently the Brewers Association came up with this independent craft brewer seal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a certification. You can put it on your can, and it means that you meet all their definitions of what a craft brewer is. I wonder if do you guys think that it would be valuable to have some similar type of like credential, or at least awareness, to like let people know, like, hey, what you're reading is like a fact-based thing, or do people not really care?
Don't they have something similar to that for the supporters too, though? Like,
I think they did just come out with an independent craft like supporter badge or something like that.
Oh, really?
That you could put up. Like if you're not a brewer, you could have that. I
so
think
I don't
that's
know
a fairly
exactly
new thing.
what that entails, but I think it's a great idea to have something like that.
I mean, I'm not sure how much people care to see. 'Cause, I mean, the problem is people aren't going to trust that, really. Because who's going to fact check me besides me?
But I think
Or unless I'm writing for someone else. If I'm writing for craftbeer.com, they're going to fact check me.
Right,
or
right,
if I'm
right.
writing for the Brewers Association.
I guess that's what I'm getting at, is like when you write for a larger publication, it's assumed if I am reading the larger publication that they did some due diligence or made sure that what you wrote is accurate. There's editors involved. There's a whole community of people.
Yeah, they've got a track record.
They've got the track record. But with freelance people, I guess in any regard, any type of freelancer, you sort of lose that. You lose that a little bit, right?
But I think with any large publication, it took them time to build up that reputation. So it'd be kind of the same thing if you had like this little symbol. It's going to take that time to build up that reputation. Same with, I think that's another difference between kind of an influencer and maybe a journalist. It takes time to build that. And if you're really trying to be an influencer only, you might get fed up with all the time it takes.
Right.
And just go on to the next big trend.
Be done with it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
I don't know. Part of me feels like influencer, it's sort of like a sanitized term for a marketer. And people don't like to think that they're being marketed to, right? We all sort of feel like we see through the marketing. Right. It was really like, and we don't like marketing is effective. That's why we do it, right? Like that's why companies have been doing it for hundreds of years. But
Labels on beer.
yeah, man, that's why we put
On the
labels on
glasses,
beer glasses, right?
You know,
There's
on
just,
the bottles.
You don't just like pick up the bottle and be like, oh, that looks good in there. I mean, we all do. You know, we all do this marketing. I feel like, you know, for the influencer, it's more like, I like this beer, and you want to be like me, right? I'm an attractive, fun, interesting, guy, and I drink this beer.
Greg always says you're the most interesting man in the world.
So so that it feels a little bit more like the marketing arm of journalism, right? Like you guys can write really great articles where you've checked all your facts and you've tried to be objective, but then we have to get it out for people to read it, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, right, we know this with beer, right? You can make the best beer in the world, and that you have to do more than that, right? You can't just be like, here's the best beer in the world.
You have to
line
connect
up
it with your
outside.
consumers.
You have to sell it.
You have to sell it.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, if you don't know what
four-letter word.
If you don't know what you want to go to school for, go for marketing, because you have to market everything.
Yeah,
whether it's
everything.
yourself or your beer or your.
Yeah.
But that's
label
also
or-
starting
yeah.
to change, like in this influencer world, like the FTC is getting involved now. And you know, if you're taking money for something
Right.
on Instagram, you're supposed to disclose that on your post.
Right.
You know, I mean, and there's enough people becoming big enough influencers now, making enough money that they legit are going to come after you eventually if you aren't doing these things, because there's enough people making good money there that they're not disclosing that this is a paid advertisement and I'm just doing this because they gave me money.
Right.
You know?
Where's the line? If someone gives you beer to review, I guess that's one thing. But if someone's
Yeah.
like, hey, here's 10 cases of beer, like maybe post a picture of my beer. Does that happen, or is that
Nobody's ever asked us to do that. We have been given free beer before, but nobody has ever asked us to do anything for it.
Sure.
I mean, we're usually there talking to them in the first place already, so we have an interest in just talking to them. So a lot of times that's, hey, have a beer.
Kind of like what we're doing here. That's kind of what we do with our interviews. They
I
have
think
some
the
beer.
only time we had, like, you know, anything more than somebody just pouring a beer or two, I don't know. We had a meetup. So in the travel community, we're in a group that's called the RV Entrepreneurs, and so it's actually a group of people that support each other in
nice.
how to make a living on the road.
That's kind of cool.
So, and they have an annual gathering, and we went to that a couple of times. And the last one we went to, we kind of had a little beer education party.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like holding a little bit of a class for people who are kind of newer into craft beer and things like that. And we had a couple breweries donate a little bit of beer to us so that we could share it with them and give them samples of different types of beer and stuff like that. But
In a way, that's kind of a sponsorship, though. Like, hey, this is
yeah,
the brewery that's sponsoring the tasting, but
Yeah.
it's up to you if you like it or not. We're not telling
Right.
you whether you like it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking about that, so a reminder, if you're following along on Facebook, feel free to get on and throw your questions on there, and we'll get to them over the course of the hour. Thinking about advertising and disclosing, Joshua Hunter's on Facebook. He's asking, how do you talk about beers or breweries that you don't like or didn't have a good experience in, right? Whether it's the beer, whether it's brewery, somebody hands you a beer and it's full of buttery diacetyl or something, or this is an unpleasant social situation.
I mean,
What happens?
I try to be polite about it, but I'm going to be honest about it. If somebody asks me about a specific brewery and I'm like, you know, I didn't really have a very good experience there, and I would say, why? Was it the beer? Yeah, the beer seemed, you know, it was a little off for me.
You would tell
And I would
exactly
say
what it
why.
was. You're not
Yeah.
going to gloss over it. Or
But I wouldn't bury, like, if I got into a confrontation with somebody who worked at that brewery or something, and so we had an argument, I would try to keep my personal, I would admit to that happened, but I would try to not overcolor it if I can do, you know.
Right.
That's hard to stop yourself from doing in the heat of the moment, but if you step back from it and you realize your reputation's on the line as a journalist, you can't just go out and bash somebody just because you didn't have a good experience with that person.
Right.
You know, there's always people you don't really connect with. So, but yeah, I hope that answers the question. I mean, I would just try to be honest about why I thought it wasn't. I wouldn't just go, oh, that's just a crap beer just because I don't like it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of beers I tend not to drink a lot of sours just because I'm not a huge sour fan, but I try a lot of different sours.
Yeah.
And I would admit to somebody that, you know, my opinion may not be the best one for you to go off of on this beer because it seems like it was probably well made, but it's just not on my palate.
well, we're not out there judging beers for like blue ribbons or anything either.
No.
So like,
Yeah.
it's subjective. Like somebody might really love a certain type of beer, and someone else might really just absolutely, they just have no desire for it whatsoever.
It's just not their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. I think it's fine, and it's fine to know that too. And I think it's better to be aware of it and be like, oh, I know I don't like this style, so there's no use in getting worked up or getting super angry about not having a beer that I didn't like. It's like, well, that's not your thing, and there's a lot of other beers. Most breweries make tons of different styles of beer.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get whatever you want.
Well, I feel like it goes back to that journalistic integrity maybe that we were talking about earlier, right? You're not going to go on and give bad reviews for all the sour beers that you don't like because you're not a big fan of sour beers, right?
Right. I wouldn't go on Untappd. I don't think I've ever rated a sour beer on Untappd because I'm not a good judge of that, and I don't want to skew somebody else's opinion if they're a big sour beer fan. You know, they may love this beer, and I may not appreciate it because I don't have the same palate that they do.
Yeah.
So, I guess switching gears a little bit, there's a question that we talked about that I want to bring up. So, like in social media in general, right, people tend to post the happiest, best times of their lives, right? So if you were to like scroll through someone's feed, you're like, wow, this person, how can I ever live up to the happiness that this person is enjoying every day of their existence? Do you, and I understand that journalism is you're trying to create content that people want to read, right? Mm-hmm. But do you both feel like there should be more coverage on sort of the less glamorous or maybe the challenging parts of beer to sort of help balance out the story between all of the good things, all the openings and the expansions and anniversary parties and releases, and sort of balance it out on the other side of things?
I think there definitely should be, and I think we're also kind of guilty of making it look like this glamorous life on Instagram as well, and social media. Like, we do post some things out there about, things aren't always rainbows and unicorns, but for the most part, if you look at the Instagram posts, they look all pretty full of beer and, like, happy things going on. But it's hard.
Yeah,
it's
you
hard
have those days like John had up at Guamela Pass, and the bucket fell, and if you see, everybody's seen the video, right? You guys.
It was on 9 News. Yeah, knocked the tri-clamp off the bright tank.
We did put that up.
Yeah, but
we did share that. Sorry, John.
It's hard being a journalist. You're not making money. Journalism in today is like next to impossible. Like it's a hard life. It's hard being a brewer. It's hard being an entrepreneur. Like, you're working so many more hours than you would if you were just working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But I think it's also that piece of passion that goes into it that makes it kind of worthwhile. So that in a way, it's almost like it's all rainbows and unicorns, because you're putting up with all that crap to get to that, like, whoa, this is really good, in a way.
Maybe we should start like an Instagram feed of just like all the negative stuff that happens, but not just like our negative, just like everybody's negative stuff gets on one feed, and then everybody can be like, oh, this is all the stuff that goes
on.
wrong.
Start a hashtag.
Yeah.
This is what I've been saying.
Day.
We need a show. We need something, because I can remember like when I started in the industry, there was this almost like this mystique around brewers, right? Like, people would come in. There was a book for a while that people came in with that had breweries in it, and it was an autograph book, right? So you would like flip to the page, and the brewer, you'd be like, oh, it's the head brewer here, and they would sign the book if they were there, and that kind of a thing. And I've always thought, like, we need something like a traveling show. We call it the brewer's monologue, and we'll just put people up on stage on a stool, and they'll tell the worst day they ever had making beer. The time that you went to keg off the 30-barrel fermenter, opened it up, went home, woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like, oops. Yeah. Go back to the brewery, beer's flowing out the front door, right?
So I can tell you, when we first started doing this, we were thinking that maybe when we, retire, that we'll be opening a brewery on a beach maybe, or in the mountains or something. That'd be a really great job, really cool gig. And the more we've interviewed brewers and owners, that has kind of come down a lot. We're like, oh, I don't know if we really want to do this.
Sound
That's
retirement strategy.
more like working more of like, 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah, glorified janitors.
We're losing money.
Yeah.
It's definitely a tough job.
Although there's different.
But it's fun.
Yeah, you guys probably see all kinds of different business models when you're out there too, right? If your business model, right, is to distribute into 25 states, then it's an 80-hour-a-week job, and it's like running a factory, right? If your business model is to sell 15 pints a day to people coming off the beach after surfing, like that, might be a lot more accessible.
You might still be the brewer at that point. If you're getting into 25 states, you may have been the brewer when you started, but you're probably not going to be the brewer anymore.
Yeah, that was always the advice, right? If all you want to do is brew beer, don't open a brewery.
Yeah.
Right. Go brew for somebody.
Yeah. I mean, most of the brewers that we know that still brew all the time, that run a small brewery like that, don't even count it as their job. Really, they work another job and then come in and brew at night or on weekends and things like that. And they're small tap rooms, obviously. Probably not even putting out 400 or 500 barrels a year. But
I was eavesdropping on some conversation yesterday, and someone was saying something about that, saying how if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And the other guy was like, "That's just such crap. Like there's no jobs out there. There are no jobs out there that you never work a day in your life, even if you absolutely love it."
Yeah.
I heard a great counter to that one day, which it was like if it was the whole thing, if you work a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. But it's actually like if you work a job you love, you'll work twice as many hours, you'll take everything way too personally, and you'll have no separation between work and personal life. And I was like, that sounds way more accurate, but not quite as alluring as the first one.
Yeah.
I think that is more accurate. Yeah.
Totally accurate. There's like no
Well,
separation.
it must. I mean, you guys made the leap. You're like, we're gonna buy the RV. We're gonna move in the RV. This is what we want to do. We're gonna do it every day, all the time. We're gonna talk to other people about doing it. We're gonna. Yeah.
It all just kind of blends together at some point where it is your job, it is your life.
It is your life, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of forget that there are weekends, and because you're still working, but sometimes you're still loving what you're doing. Other times you're getting really pissed off because
Fed up with it,
all I'm doing is still working.
Yeah.
I like that blend myself because I prefer that over going to somebody else's place of business and sitting down at a desk for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day or 12 or whatever you're going to do and have to be on somebody else's clock all the time, and we can kind of maneuver that stuff around. Yeah, a lot of times we're working hard, but we get a little more choice about it.
Yeah, it is very much a trade-off, though, that a lot of people, I think, don't understand, where it's not just like you're working for yourself for 8 hours a day and then you have your free time. It's much more like you're working for yourself 24 hours a day. Yeah. Congratulations. Right. Yeah. So a little different, a little harder to get used to, I think. But I like that idea of sort of having a community. I think it always helps to have other people who are doing similar things, and the sort of that meetup community is really interesting. Mm-hmm. Is that like hard to meet up with people who are always on the move? Or like I would imagine no one
it's
ever.
It's hard to
in,
meet up with
space.
the same people all the time.
right.
That's tough. But we do have a lot of friends in that space now, and so we all kind of stay in touch, via whatever, Instagram, Facebook, text, whatever. And you just kind of always, hey, we're going to be here, and kind of see who's in the area or something.
See who comes by.
But then, they've had this RV Entrepreneur Summit for the last 3 years, and they always pick a location. Like the next one is March of next year.
Yeah.
March of 2020, and they're already planning for that, like where it's going to be. And
right. So it travels around the U.S. Yeah. It's not in the same state. It's not like a Colorado RV entrepreneurs, although there probably are enough here that you could do it.
You probably could, yeah.
That would be funny if the RV entrepreneurs group met in the same space every year.
They are in the same area.
Everyone has to circle back around.
Next year's in the same space as last year. Yeah. Kind of like GABF, though. GABF's got a home here.
Yeah, we were talking about this last week, actually. Like, is it time to take GABF on the road?
It's a big beast to maneuver.
It's a big beast to maneuver.
As travelers, I think we all could kind of.
I would love
it.
We would love it. We would love to be able to see, like with Craft Brewers Conference, the beer cultures of different places.
Yeah, because that travels around, and I know you guys are both travelers too, so I'm sure you guys would love it.
Yeah. We started.
And it'd be good
so
for some of the breweries. Some of the other Brewers Association members would probably love it because it'd be a little easier if GABF came a little closer to your home once in a while than to travel from Vermont to Denver.
I think that's a big part of it. And if you are a small brewery from Vermont or from any part of the U.S., like sometimes it can be really hard to justify spending the time and money and resources to go to GABF. In addition to how much it costs to actually get in, there's the travel and the expenses of putting your staff up. Like I think it would definitely help expose. It would be like worse for me, but better for other people. So I'm like kind of okay with it. But like I feel like having that accessibility, adding that accessibility for other brewers would be great.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody following along on Facebook, you're watching Beercraft. We're here with Ken and April Pishna of Living a Stout Life. We're talking about beer journalism. We've got some people on Facebook chiming in, thinking about influencers and journalism. They say, I think influencers are more geared towards the beers, which is, it involves like rating beers and trading beers, whereas journalism is more about talking to the brewers and talking to the brewery owners.
Yeah,
How do we feel about this?
I think that's probably fairly accurate, you know. I mean, but there are also a lot of good people out there that do talk about the beers. And although I think in a lot of publications, when they talk about the beers, you tend to see them talking to brewers about beers quite frequently. Like, I'm sure both of you have been approached by different publications wanting to talk about beers, and they'll usually have you talk about somebody else's beer and kind of put you on the spot. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as online, when you look at, say, Instagram or something, and you go through somebody's feed who's got a beer connection, it's generally fairly easy to tell if they're more of, you know, I'm a beer fan and I'm posting about these beers, or this is something that's a little bit more, I'm you know, promoting my content, I'm promoting the interviews we do, or I'm promoting, you know, I mean, I post a lot of beer photos though too. So. But
it's hard not to. It's hard not to
because it's a good promotion for your product too. I mean, for us to promote our YouTube channel and our website, you know, we take pictures of some of the beers and the breweries we're at and things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
it does kind of gray a little bit,
yeah,
but
there's a lot of
that's
space.
a good general.
That is a decent general one, but there's a lot of space actually for, if you're going to separate them, for them to work together to promote the whole, you know, craft beer industry.
Yeah.
Well, and that doesn't mean an influencer is wrong for what they're doing. It's just the difference between journalism and influencer. And
Yeah, I do feel like the line often gets crossed back and forth. I mean, that's happened. The situation you were describing has happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to Jeff, right, where a publication or another podcast or something reaches out and they want to talk about the beer. And then what I find most of the time is they'll end the interview and they'll go, "What's your favorite beer that's not yours?" And you're like, that all of a sudden, right, like now you're an influencer, right? You were an expert on brewing, and now you're an influencer.
Well, because it switched to like, what's your opinion? From like, what you can't have your favorite beer, I feel like, can't be a fact-based decision. It's like, I like this beer for a number of reasons, you know. My favorite beer could be PBR for all you know, but like it doesn't.
Is it? I would shame you a little bit if it was.
It's not.
No.
But just
that's actually something we do sometimes is what we interview people, and we don't save it till the end of the interview. Well, sometimes it's towards
It just
the end.
depends how it goes.
But we keep it on camera and usually go, "What's your favorite worst beer?"
Yeah.
And that's usually, and that we developed it basically out of our own personal experience of just taking a jab at the big beers, the mass-produced beers and stuff.
But it's funny how many brewers will instantly answer and they know exactly what we mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had brewers say like, "Oh, Miller High Life."
Yeah.
Because we were playing pool last night down at the bar, and that was the cold beer right there, and it was perfect. And it's just because it's the moment, you know. It's not always the beer. Sometimes it's just the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, the situation's important too. Like, you're not going to go out to like a dive bar and play pool and be like, "I'll have your finest whatever." Honestly, it probably won't be there. So like, you kind of got to pick something else anyway. And
I'm not going to get a crooked stave beer.
Right. A lot of dive bars. I haven't seen a dive bar with crooked stave yet, but we do have some here.
Like, on that
some
note,
on the table, so.
it's hard to kind of have your own opinion in today's world because there's so much pressure for you to be one way or another. And I think it's the same with beer. Like, there's all this pressure for you to like this certain type of craft beer, when really at that moment you just want to guzzle something because it's hot.
Right.
Or
a lawnmower beer, you know?
Yeah, I always think that the other question I've gotten before where, you know, it feels like we're starting to leave the realm of journalism. It's just that. It's like, what's the worst beer you've ever had, right? And you're like, come on, man. Like, don't put me in that position, right? We've all had bad beer. But that's like, you're just like fishing for the clickbait title, right? Now I'm going to be like, "Oh, Scarlet Giant's the worst beer I've ever had." And that's going to be like, it's not. But that's going to be.
Morris says Scarlet Giant.
I know. I was getting ready to write
not that my opinion is that important, but it's, you know, it's like, that's what, I'm like,
That's when you're losing that piece of integrity, though, and taking it completely out of context.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, and plus there's, like we were talking about earlier, there's a good kind of kinship in the brewing industry, and it's like if you start going there just because you didn't like a beer, I mean, you could ruin a great friendship you had. You know?
Yeah, you'd be like, "Oh, that beer you made the other day, it was pretty terrible."
And for you as a brewer and your brewery and everything, what does that really help you to say, "Here's the worst beer I've ever had"?
Yeah,
it doesn't.
You know?
I like the best.
And there's no journalistic point to that, or there's no reason for that other than, like you said, clickbait.
Right. I like the way you guys phrase it. The best worst beer. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That makes it fun.
Yeah.
And we try to keep it fun because that's where
I got
our
grief
came
for
from.
that, though, in one article that I wrote because I was talking about like the best worst beer, and then somebody commented back saying, "We don't have terrible beers," and I was like, "I never said you had terrible beers."
Well, that's just an example of someone who doesn't read.
Yeah, I was somebody who misread, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
misread.
So we've got John Conway on Facebook. He's asking about sort of the business side of beer journalism that you guys have been into for a while now. So you're living in an RV, you're driving around 40 states. How do you make money as a traveling beer
We just
journalist?
get money thrown at us as we drive
Yeah,
around.
people are
basically.
like,
So it's the
Yeah,
same as how breweries work. It's
I
the
don't
same business model.
I don't understand that question. What's money?
yeah,
I don't understand.
that answers it right there. Yeah, I mean,
is it a barter economy? Is that what I'm hearing?
there is some barter economy going on, but there's also like we pick up freelance gigs and like write for different other publications besides our own and make money there. With our site, we have some like affiliate marketing partnerships, so basically advertising,
Sure.
things like that.
We
We also work other jobs outside of just our website, but like I said, I think freelance jobs and things like that, writing freelance for other publications, pays some of it, and different things like that.
And I think one of the largest misconceptions that we also have is that when you're in an RV, it doesn't mean you have to move every 2 or 3 days. You can stay put for a couple weeks, a month, or 2 months, kind of like what we're doing right now is staying put for a couple months. So I'm working a temporary teaching job for 2 months to kind of save up some money.
Yeah.
And for
Which is
us,
great.
we live a little different than a lot of, like if you think of maybe more the retired person traveling around in an RV, you kind of picture them going from RV park to RV park, right? And staying there for a week at a time somewhere in different cities and things. And we tend to stay off the grid a lot. We're self-contained, so we go a lot of just, off the beaten path somewhere. Or there's actually a lot of breweries across the country that are part of a program called Harvest Host, which if they have enough space, if you're part of this Harvest Host program, you can call ahead and they'll let you just park there overnight. And so you can spend the night there, sometimes a night or two, and use their space.
And we'll search for mountain biking trails because we want to find trails right outside of our door. So we search for that. And just camping like that and staying in places like that is a way to save a lot of money. So you don't need to make as much money as you think you might.
And it feeds our outdoor addiction too, though, because we like to be outdoors a lot, hiking and biking and things like that. So we're not always at a brewery. A lot of times we're parked off grid somewhere, and we might do a lot of our work out there, but then when we're ready to take a break or we're done for the day, we can just hop out on a mountain bike trail or go hiking or whatever.
Yeah, and your website has a lot more on it than just beer. It's about sort of mobile entrepreneurism and a lot of other interesting things other than just this is what brewery we're at right now.
Right. We try to work in a lot of travel and mountain biking's become a big part of what we do. Mountain biking and beer kind of seem to really kind of go hand in hand quite a bit, and people are looking for where can I ride my mountain bike and then end at the trailhead and where's the brewery right next to the trailhead.
Is mountain bike journalism, is that your next foray?
That's our super
Craft beer
niche.
and biking.
Super niche.
That's our super niche we're going into.
There's so many ways you can make money. You just have to think non-traditionally. I mean, our society is kind of veering off where you don't have to do the technical Monday through Friday 9 to 5, but it's still, people really still struggle with that. And with the growth of the internet and you can get a signal almost anywhere. You just have to be creative to figure out how you can make money at this. Even if you only want to do journalism, it's still possible. It's just hard and it takes time.
Yeah. Well, I feel we were talking earlier about the hashtag van life craze that I feel like was everywhere on Instagram for a long time. It's it sort of started that way. People are like, I want to live this way.
Right.
And if I monetize it in this way, then I can afford to do that.
Right. And there's a lot of trade-offs. That's why you see a lot of influencers that, especially in the mobile space like that with van life or RV life and things like that, there are a lot of trade-outs there. You get equipment at a discounted price, or maybe a barter type situation where they're doing some Instagram influencing to get that.
Yeah.
Or they're writing about it. And I think that's an okay approach as long as you're being transparent about it.
Well, there's ambassador programs out there, kind of is what I think you're thinking of too. Is you can use different people's, equipment or something if you're outdoor gear, and then you get some gear from that. But then still, it's having that journalistic integrity. If the gear is awful, then make sure it's not saying that this gear is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and
Just
we
be
do
truthful.
things like referral or affiliate programs. Like we've been Homebrewers Association members for a long time because we do a little home brewing too. And they actually have a referral program where if people sign up from your web link or whatever, you get paid a small commission or something like that. And so, I don't mind telling people, it's a great thing to do. Even if you don't home brew, the Home Brewers Association is pretty awesome because you get discounts at breweries and
Yeah.
you get first access to GABF tickets. And yeah, there's a lot of pretty cool perks besides whether you're a home brewer or not.
Yeah. I was like, Joshua Hunter on Facebook was commenting on your comment about, asking about the best, worst beer, and just saying that he likes that you guys ask brewers that, and when brewers are like, oh, I drink Coors Banquet or Miller High Life, because it takes away this, there's some perceived snobbery there. Oh, when I go home at the end of the day, I enjoy this Russian River Hazy IPA every single day.
That's all I want.
That's all I want because I'm a brewer and I just drink big complex beers.
Yeah, there's a balance there. I think a lot of brewers sort of, because of the business side of the large breweries and how detrimental that can be to craft beer, sort of have this animosity towards big beer. But it doesn't mean that every brewer is snobbing out every day of their lives and not having Pacifico when they're hanging out on the beach or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys are, if you're working on, different crazy, you guys both brew some pretty intensely flavored beers. So I'm sure at the end of the day, sometimes you're just like, you either need a really light beer or water, and that's about it, because it's like your palate's probably wrecked.
Well, that's
what it totally can be.
Plug one of our previous guests. That's what I often hear up in relation to Beer Stout Lager House, right? They do the slow pour pills. It's just this amazing Pilsner, and if you go there on a Thursday night, it's a bunch of brewers.
Yeah. It's like the industry brewery, because that's what most brewers want to
We're all recovering from, drinking the heavy stuff all week or whatever.
Yeah, you've been brewing your Turkish coffee stout all week and
I think
Rechai stout. Or
like any job, though, if you're a photographer and you want to, you're lugging all around your equipment and your lights and your big lenses and your huge cameras and all that, and then sometimes you just want to take out your iPhone and take a picture and nobody knows you took it. You don't always want to have that camera on you. You want to just snap a picture real quick.
Don't let anyone see me, but...
So we're almost out of time. The hour always goes by really fast. But if people want to know more about living a stout life, or if they want to follow you and on your journeys, how do they do that?
We're at livingastoutlife.com. That's livingastoutlife.com. And that's also our handle on Facebook and on Instagram is just Living a Stout Life.
And YouTube.
And YouTube channel is youtube.com/livingastoutlife. So we got it everywhere except Twitter. Twitter, we're just A Stout Life.
Just A Stout Life.
Yeah, because we had too many characters.
Yeah, Twitter's a tough one. We had to change our
kicked
handle
our
for
butt.
Twitter, too. Yeah, everything else is the same.
Yeah.
So A Stout Life was the best I could come up with on that.
Yeah. No, it's great. I'm always following along when you guys are in Montana or wherever you are, because you said we're trapped at the brewery, right? Like we were talking about. And, love to see what's going on in other places around the country outside
Except
of
when
Colorado.
you're on Easter Island. And
Except when, it's hard. There's not a lot of internet on Easter Island. That's true.
Well, everyone can continue to live vicariously through your online presence, I think.
Yeah,
on all your
absolutely.
travels.
I love it.
Yeah, so Ken and April, thank you guys so much for coming on Beercraft.
Yeah.
Thank
thanks for
you,
having us on,
everybody, following along on Facebook, and we'll be back next Monday at 4 o'clock with more Beercraft Live from Studio Kitchen, Colorado.